Morning. How's it going? Pretty sure I had to tap that one down pretty far. Oh yeah. These own-rolled smokes are not great. But anyway, leaving that aside, I had a topic in mind when I hit record. Now it's gone. So, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to talk about. But you're going to notice that there's going to be a cut in a second and my cigarette will be lit. Okay, so, I'm having a conversation with a guy on Discord about the Newfoundland accent. And he started off by asking me if I was a Newfie. No, I'm not a Newfie. Newfie is what we call a dog. I'm a man, so I'm a Newfoundlander. If I was from Labrador, I'd be a Labradorian, not a lab. Kind of that sort of point. And it was an older man who pointed out that distinction to me, and I actually really appreciate that. There's a degree of dignity that needs to be reclaimed by Newfoundlanders, in my opinion. Especially given the astounding number of Newfie jokes that are told. Ironically, most often by Newfies. The reason that it matters, that distinction, is because Newf or Newfie tends to be applied universally to dogs, where Newfie, and Newfoundlander are applied to people. And ideally, Newfoundlander is what you would call a person. But not Newfoundland dress for a woman. Which, yeah, no, don't do that. Just a second. Got an alarm going off. There we go. Silence. Just to make it very clear, I'm very proud of my Newfoundland roots, my ethnic Newfoundland heritage. But one of the issues with expressing pride in my culture is that we're a culture that is very much comfortable with making fun of ourselves. But we tend to be very much averse to self-criticism and looking at ourselves, taking a hard look at ourselves and really seeing what the problems are with our culture. And while I do intend to do a Newfoundlandia series, a series about Newfoundland, or aspects of Newfoundland, legends, culture, folklore, things like that, my first piece in that series is going to be reading from a Newfie joke book. These are jokes that are essentially public domain because no one's really sure who came up with them. And generally, Newfoundlanders tell a lot of jokes that, you know, if you're not from Newfoundland, you wouldn't necessarily understand that we tell jokes that laugh at ourselves and take no offense from it. Obviously, we're telling jokes about ourselves, which is extremely illustrative of the way that we don't take things very seriously as a people. The problem is that a mainlander, or a come from away, depending on which term you want to use, I grew up calling people from anywhere other than Newfoundland mainlanders, which, yeah, to be fair, isn't 100% accurate because generally that was referring to people from Canada. Come from away, or CFAs, are people from anywhere other than Newfoundland. And if you're a Hawaiian islander, you're obviously not a mainlander. In fact, if I recall correctly, I've heard Hawaiians in conversation refer to mainlanders. And, today is Thursday. So I will probably do the first Newfoundlandia episode tomorrow. That'll be just a recorded episode. I'll do that later today. And I'll tell a few Newfoundland jokes and then talk a little bit about Newfoundland. A little more than I have here. But one of the points, one of the reasons I'm making this video is to point out that where American blacks are allowed to use certain words for themselves and no one else is allowed to use it, Newfoundlanders don't generally feel the same way. There's kind of two camps in Newfoundland about the word Newfie. A lot of people will say, no, that's fine, it doesn't matter. Personally, I prefer to point out the distinction to people because it's important for them to understand that the term has been used derogatorily in the past. The combination of goofy, Newfie, for example. And one of the reasons that that term has been considered derogatory, especially when the word goofy precedes it. Sorry, got a bit of an itch in my armpit. The reason it's derogatory when the word goofy precedes it is because Canucks, Canadians, before we joined Confederation, and since, derided Newfoundlanders. And ironically, in very real ways, if not for Newfoundlanders, Canada would not have the infrastructure it has. Newfoundlanders helped build the railway. Newfoundlanders helped build almost a very significant number of the skyscrapers in Toronto and Chicago. You can find pictures of Newfoundlanders working on high steel from the 30s and 40s. No trouble. The phrase working out in Newfoundland means something very different than lifting weights. Working out in Newfoundland means, oh, I left Newfoundland to find work. Or someone has left Newfoundland to go find work. If people are talking about, oh, where's John? Oh, John's working out. He's not in the shed lifting weights. He's on the mainland working. When I lived in Alberta, I had an older fella, I should say, sit down in the bar next to me and start complaining about Newfoundlanders, my accent at the time. And as you can tell listening to me, my accent is not particularly thick, though that's a combination of practice and I suppose the presenter voice that I'm using when I speak to you guys. And over the years, I've somewhat lost my accent, which is unfortunate in some ways and beneficial in others. But this older fella was complaining about Newfoundlanders coming to Alberta and taking work away from Albertans, rather. And being a bit of a wit, I pointed out to him that, well, and I did drop into the accent, and I will do so now, intentionally. What I responded to him with was basically, well, buddy, we had all the work done down home. We figured we'd come up here and help you with yours. And that isn't even necessarily all that thick an accent for this area of Newfoundland. If you're interested in potentially watching me completely descend, speaking of descending, I have to lower that camera angle. If you're interested in watching me potentially descend completely into the Newfoundland accent, come watch the Sultans of Shadilay drunk stream around Halloween. Scheduling is still being worked out. But I don't drink very often. When I do, my accent does get at least somewhat thicker, or ticker, possibly. I may drop all my H's and start using a lot of apostrophes. The apostrophe is the 27th letter of the Newfoundland alphabet, by the way. But Yeah, you will quite likely see me over the course of the evening as I have a few drinks descend into that accent, and I will probably tell a few blue jokes. um, anyway, that's amazingly 10 minutes of content on one topic, so I appear to be getting better at my focus, though I do somewhat use, and I just did it that time with the I do tend to use a fair bit of verbal filler occasionally. I'm working on that as well. Although, being that this is generally off the top of my head, I do occasionally have to pause and gather my thoughts, which expresses itself as an and that one was intentional. But anyway, I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you all continue to have good days and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.